All right, guys, time for the final bit, right? We're talking deformers today, and this is the final video when it comes to all these settings, and we're gonna do a wrap up after that, and just go over some of the stuff that I failed to mention, and give you some tips before we begin. But anyway, we're gonna start with deformers, and for that, obviously, we need an object to deform. And I'm actually getting too used to creating these from the create pane, so I'm going to create this sphere here. All right, so let's see what we got. Go into the deformers, deform, and tear off this menu here, and let's see what we actually have to work with here. Well, first one is a blend shape deformer, which we're not going to go into because this is for animation. Just make a mental note that it's there. Essentially, it allows you to blend between two shapes. So if I went into a sculpting mode, and I started sculpting this thing in some particular fashion, this would be my first shape, and then I would go Control Z and maybe like go in the opposite way, and then I would create some kind of a wavy effect in this case. Although I gotta probably reset the tool, and you would get the blend shape would basically allow you to blend between these two states of the object. All right. But we're not going to be animating anything just yet. Just forget about animation for now. We're going to talk about clusters and lattices and the shrink wrap bit. Okay, so let me just go ahead into the sculpting tool again. Actually, go and open this up with the settings. I'm going to reset the tool. Maybe a little bit too big though. So yeah, maybe like this, and the magnitude maybe like this. So this will allow me to create to have some deformation here, do some weird things. Okay, so I have something here, right? There's an option here called the shrink wrap, which I really haven't used much. As in, I mean, I don't see much of a point using it, but there's just like anything in Maya, there's always a point to something. So I suspect you could just adapt it to a particular way. So let's say we get this torus here, and we can actually project it onto this meteor, because let's say I created some kind of space rock. I can shrink wrap it around, and this will create some sort of weird I don't even know why would you do that. All right, there must be a reason to do it, but notice that whatever I do, this will shrink wrap according to where my position is of the sphere here. Okay, so it's important to understand that all these deformers are usually stationary in a particular spot, and you have to use the history, to dump the history basically to lock it in. So if I Alt Shift D and I lock this in, this should be now, this should be its own object at this stage, right? So whatever I just did, I created a shrink wrap. So I basically have an object which mimics this one, which I really don't know why I would want to do, because I can just duplicate it, right? But let's say whatever, maybe you will find some use for it. Maybe there's some clever way to use it, I don't know. But it's definitely there available to you. Okay, so we're gonna go back into this into origin here. Let's go and use the lattice bit. Now the lattice is a little bit different. It's a very useful tool. Okay, this is a tool, by the way. Notice that it's a tool, not anything else. When it comes to lattices, actually let's just lattice it once and see what happens. When it comes to lattices, you will quickly notice that it's not like an object in itself, in its own right. Okay, and that's because it is. This is an object. Okay, what happens is, this is a cage, like a network type deal. If we go into our channel box here, you will quickly see we got divisions. So what we're going to do, we're going to go 8 by 8 by 8. So we have our divisions here. This is very well divisioned, and this will allow you to essentially sculpt your model, but only when it's inside the lattice. All right, this is very useful for animation and stuff like that, like if a car would crash, because this allows you can go into the outputs here. You will notice that you got different outputs here, the envelope, like how much you want this to impact between 1 and 0. This is normalized, but let me just demonstrate this to you. Go into lattice points, and as you can see, we got all these different points. Okay, whichever points you grab, you can modify them, and you will have an effect on the object. Okay, so if you grab these points here, move them out, you're gonna have this effect of moving the whatever object is inside the lattice, it will be affected. Well, not whatever object is inside the lattice, the one that's connected to it. Okay, so notice that now if I go ahead and select the lattice and move it around, I will move it both with it and the object. But if I grab the object, I can move it back and forth between the points here that I've edited, and I will be getting the result that corresponds to the current modification of the lattice tool. Now this is definitely useful. Imagine if you had a guy coming in and he wants to turn into a werewolf. I mean, it would be a fairly severe, fairly complicated lattice, but you could pull this off. Or if there was a bullet flying and you wanted it to explode in a particular fashion, right? If you had like several components inside it. So lattice is definitely a useful tool for several reasons. It's just that it allows you to interactively create deformations that will, like, they're not non-destructive, so you don't have to bake them in. Well, not bake them in, but delete the history, right? Obviously you can, and probably that's what you're going to do once you delete the history, but at least it allows you to perform several operations that are otherwise hard to make. All right, so you can just maybe grab these bits here, which actually need a lot more pull because they're very far away from the origin. See, the closer you are to the origin, the better you'd be. You can actually isolate the lattice if you wanted to. I think there was a way. We go into show and just view selected. This should create, well, this is a tool after all. I don't know. I think there was a way. You could remove obviously the mesh and just see the lattice, but then what's the point if you have to jump between the two? But like I said, it's basically, you have to figure out how to use it on your own. I've never had to do anything fancy with it, real fancy, because remember, it's all about how far inside the cage this stuff is. So if I go and select back the what's it called, the sphere, you can see that if I move it up, it will actually correspond to these changes. Now, obviously, this is a very complicated lattice. I mean, a very dense lattice. You won't be using that. But once you're done, you basically delete the history with either the shortcut or just in this way. And now you have this object which has a particular geometry. And as you can see, there's plenty of problems, obviously, with its shape. We could probably, we'll probably have to work on it. And like I said, lattice is more of an animating deformer, useful for animation than it's actually more of like a modeling toolkit. And before I delete this object, I just want to go into the soft modification bit as well. It's basically like a soft select type deal. So if you go ahead and select this, you can soft modify this, and you can go and start setting up different settings. You can see the gradient here. If I start moving something or scaling it, it will be scaled most to where I just clicked, and least when it's red. All right, and you can do some movements as well, as you can see here. It's like a soft select type movement. So if you ever wanted to do anything like that, I don't know, maybe you'd be used to it. You can just swap around the settings. Maybe you wanted to do this kind of modification, right? So that'd be handy. And then you go back into your toolkit here, and you can actually just grab this bit here. You can just scale it up and down. It's useful, definitely. It's just that a lot of the times I don't see myself using it because, like, what would I do with this, right? So you go back into your object mode, just Alt D, come on, Alt Shift D. Oh boy, okay, Alt Shift D. There we go. Yeah, as you can see, I just created something that resembles, I really don't know what. In no way, in no world would I actually think, oh gee, if I wanted to get to this shape, I probably should go through all of these steps. Okay, so I'd never probably use this deformer. One of the most useful deformers really is the cluster. This allows you to cluster several vertices together, so or control vertices. So in our case, if we go ahead and create a curve, right, boom, 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 boom. And we wanted to maybe work on it, we would go into our control vertices, grab this one and maybe this one, and then we could create a cluster. As you can see, the cluster here is basically a deformer. It allows us to control all of these, basically these 3 points. Okay, sorry, these 2 points that I've selected. I believe it also works with, I'm not sure though, I think it works with edit points. Does it work with edit points? Cluster, where'd it go? There we go. Yes, it works with edit points, which is amazing, although it does not hook up to their transform. So you're gonna have to probably hook that up with a constraint. But anyway, we're gonna go into our, a control vertex, select both of these and create a cluster. Now what I wanted to note here, it's important that usually your clusters, you'd be using something like that for a spine on a character perhaps, or something like a snake to be able to modify these easier, because you can rotate these as well. That's the cool bit. You can rotate these and you can actually move their pivot to a particular point, and then you can rotate from there. So you can see that this has definitely a lot of uses, especially when it comes to animation. But what's important to understand is that this object right here, we can just go ahead and where's the center pivot? Center its pivot around. But basically this this thing is a deformer. So if you go ahead and delete the history on your whole scene, which a lot of people recommend, be like, yeah, go to edit, delete all by type history, and that'll sort all your problems out. You will lose this deformer, okay? Especially if you have an IK spline, which is not unlike a curve. Usually people do this with a curve or with an IK spline. But what I'm saying is that you're gonna lose all these deformers, and it's extremely annoying once you do. All right, so don't go ahead and randomly delete history once you have any deformers in your scene. All right. The point on curve bit is essentially the same, a little bit different. Essentially, it allows you to grab a couple of points. Go to edit points, grab these points here, and maybe these here, and just create point on curve. And now you can actually, you have these locators, which are easier to grab and animate. So if you have something on top of it, you can grab these locators and, I don't know, do whatever you want with them and animate them. But in general, I really find this point on curve kind of pointless, because usually what you'd want to do is create a cluster of these things. Right, and then on the cluster you put a locator. I don't think if it will work on a cluster. No, it won't work on a cluster. So you need to put a locator on the cluster if you wanted to affect like these two, for example, if you had it all set up just the right way. That's really it. We're not going to be doing any texturing here, so there's no point talking about texture stuff. Oh yeah, the nonlinear stuff. Jesus, I almost forgot about the nonlinear stuff. Let's delete all of that, and you'll notice, by the way, that we still have our locators here, so we probably have to delete those as well. You can go and check out in the attribute box their positions and scales. Obviously, you can have all of these different things, like the actual locator, what it does, how much it affects the the point which it's connected to or parented to. We'll just delete these, and what we're gonna do now is create a cylinder, and we're gonna create it along the z-axis, which it is right now selected, which is nice. I'm gonna go ahead and well, what are we gonna do? Let's see, go tear off the nonlinear stuff for once. Now I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger, because I believe, by the way, you can do anything that I'm doing here from the channel box through your attribute editor, right? Remember this, you can go to polycylinder and add some subdivisions and whatever. But we're not going to bother with that. We're just going to go ahead and go into channel box and open this up, like zero this out, and go into our radius or height and increase the height, right? This is what we're going to do. So this is our height here. And what we want to do is bend this object. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click bend, and you will quickly notice that there is something sticking out, but we don't really have any effect. Well, first of all, that's because we need to go through these options here, only because it's essentially you need to figure out which way is the low bound, which way is the high bound, how much curvature you're going to get. Obviously, once you click create, you can actually do this from your shapes and inputs here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go into the bend, and we're going to say we're going to increase the curvature here like this. We're actually going to have to rotate this as well by 90 degrees. Oops, my bad. I'm not sure which way was this supposed to go. I think there was some way to get this thing rolling, like so. Yeah, we're going to have to rotate this by 90 degrees, I believe. and then we go into this thing, and then we go into the bend bit here, and then we increase the curvature, and then we can actually keep bend this stuff. Unfortunately, our shape does not have enough polygons. As you can see, this is not really working correctly, so we need to go into a poly cylinder, and we're going to need to increase the subdivisions, and now we're going to have the effect that we're looking for. So this is very handy when you want to do something. Obviously, you can increase the curvature from here. Well, you can't. Sorry, this is already hooked up. This is a fed channel. But if you go ahead and go into the low bound, you can see how much, basically, how much of an effect you're going to get from your low point, and then is the same thing can go from a high point. So if you needed to make something like a sword, you'd probably do something like this. Right, this would be something along the lines of this thing here, and you'd probably have to move it upwards a little bit. So this would be like a katana tip. So you would save that, and then you'd probably duplicate this and go up a little bit further down. You have another bend and increase the curvature. I don't think, though, this thing is being fed the second bend. Yeah, unfortunately it's not. So you have to either hook it up by yourself or just lock this in with a history wipe, and then do this all over again, so that you can get a particularly, like, some special type of bend. Obviously, if you wanted to make something like a sword, you'd probably be better off using the NURBS curves, because it's far easier to make the shape of, sword shape with a curve than have a cylinder and then bend it around. However, there's definitely cases when you want to use this setting here. The envelope, by the way, is important because it allows you to, it shows you how much it will be affecting your object. So you can have a very small envelope, maybe something like this, and increase your high bound perhaps, and you would get some, like, a little bit more of an effect. Obviously, if this was a sword, this would be probably an ideal curvature. You'd want to maybe drop it down a little bit. I'm not sure, like this. Maybe this would be a little bit too much. But like I said, just play. You can always play around with the settings, and once you're happy with what you got, just gonna Alt-Shift-D and delete all the history, and this is gonna lock in all your settings. The rest are really self-explanatory. The flare bit is basically gonna provide you. I'm just gonna delete this and create a cube, because I believe the cube is the best thing to demonstrate this on. The flare bit will basically give you 2 points, and it's gonna blow something up in between. So if you go into flare here, as you can see, we got 2 points, in this case 2 circles. Go into the inputs, and you can start doing things like the curve. So anything in between will be blown up. All right, so you can create these shapes whichever way you want them to. You can increase how much of your you can increase how much you want to actually affect the low and the high bound, just like in the other bit. So you could maybe extrude like this. The star flares and the end flares, you can actually get them to be scaled around, which is pretty cool. I do believe if you go into modify here, you could actually get your where is it? I'm not sure where it went, but I think there must be some. Oh, soft modification tool. Cool. You've got another one here as well. Control T. Yeah, this will give you all of them. So you could grab these with Control T and work on them whichever way you want. This is a useful shortcut that I was not aware existed. Oops, I went to lasso. My bad. Wow, this is really cool. I did not know you could actually use these universal manipulators. So you can turn it on and off. Obviously, I believe you can turn it on and off. No. Okay, whatever. All you got to do is basically use this input here if you want to modify something. I was not aware of this. Man, you see, that's Maya, right? You always find something cool, which will help with your workflow. That's the cool bit about it. And you can see, by the way, how this thing works in more detail. So anyway, once you're done, you can obviously Alt-Shift-D with this thing, and I believe you should be able to get rid of this manipulator. Okay. Go back into transform tools. Maybe I want to not show it. None. Seriously? Okay, the one time I find something cool, and now I can't freaking disable it. Okay, so you can enable it with Shift T, and then you disable it for some reason with nothing. So I'm gonna have to set up a shortcut for that, not to show it. Right? I'm gonna have to set up a shortcut for that, but that's a cool bit. I like it. I'm gonna use it a lot. I like it. Maybe Shift T or something. But yeah, this looks definitely cool. The second bit is the sine. It's basically a sine wave. If you create it here, you can see, you know, again, the same settings with low bound, no bound. You can have a deformation order, which would be basically, it will change depending on what you set up here. But let's just create one and you'll see what I mean. In our case, we'd increase the amplitude and you will see, well, this is a very small object, so we're probably going to have to scale it up a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more, and perhaps this was not the best way to show it, but essentially once you have the sine, you can increase the envelope, for example, to reduce the envelope to reduce the effect. Wavelength, it will increase the wavelength, obviously. All of these settings are very self-explanatory. You could always just play around with these settings once you try to create something. The offset essentially is I can't even explain it. Well, basically this allows you to, these settings here, modify the wavelength, okay, the sine wave. Let me just delete this now because I'm not happy with this cube. I'm going to create a new one, and we're going to go into squash. Now, squash is the opposite of flare. So we created the squash, and as you can see here, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory again. Essentially, you squash by a particular factor, and it just makes it, it does the same as the flare, but like in the opposite way, all right? You can increase the squash like this, or you can increase the squash like this, okay? So whatever floats your boat. As you can see, it's very close to the flare. I mean, you can get pretty much the same effect if you squash in the opposite way. There's a couple of different settings here, though. You can squash like this, but here again, notice that I'm getting a similar result. You can have a particular smoothness to your squashing, and obviously at the beginning and here at the end. Oh, where is it? Okay, apparently there is no end to this thing. But yeah, fairly self-explanatory. When it comes to wave, the wave is similar to the sine, and the twist is similar to, well, the twist. It's very simple. Most of these have a twist by default anyway. So we're going to go and start the angle. You can see that I am twisting between 2 points. I believe I can grab this bit and, you know, make it bigger or smaller to twist more or less. And there's also high and low bound, so, you know, the effects, we could just use it from this side as well. Envelope too obviously works. The less you have it, the less of an effect you're gonna have on your object. All right. As you can see, I still have my squash tool running around here. So there's definitely you can definitely have fun with these deformers. However, remember that if you're going to delete the history of an object and you want the deformers to stick around, always go with a non-deformer history. All right. Because you might be halfway to animating your perfectly settled rigging, you know, rigged skeleton, and you know, your mesh, your character, whatever, and then by accident you can go ahead and delete all the history, and you know, all your hard work is down the drain, unless you have a backup, of course. Anyway, I'm just gonna go and Alt-Shift-D this thing and lock it in. As you can see, we've created something completely pointless. At least with these deformers, we didn't achieve something that we wouldn't have achieved otherwise. We could have achieved this, you know, just by moving polygons left and right. But it's nice to know that these things are around here, right? The wave and the sine are similar. The squish and the flare are also similar. The bend and the twist are also similar, and they're all their own evil ways. So we can go click the wave, for example. You can go and see it's pretty much the same. You got an amplitude. It's just horizontal, right? The sine is like this. Wave is like this. Very simple. And that's about it. I believe that's all we went through, right? I believe that is all we went through. That's the squash, the twist, and the flare. Yeah, all of them are fairly happy on their own. So yeah, that's basically it when it comes to deformers. It's basically a way to modify an already existing mesh without having to go around and you know, screw around with polygons. Not to say that you can't achieve, for example, this form here without a twist and a squish, right? This is mostly the form achieved with a twist, but it's nice to have it around because in some cases this is basically this is a lot easier to use in some cases, right? This bottom bit here is essentially a, you know, the way to edit these, like the blend shape, the lattice, the shrink wrap. You will notice they're exactly the same as here. Pool membership is essentially if you got the lattice or a cluster, how many people, like how many vertices are part of that cluster, etc. Mirror deformer weights, that's when you start like the paint weight painting. So in our case, if we had a deformer, like a, oh, I don't know, like a flare, right? And go into the channel box here and click the flare, and maybe we do something like this. Okay, notice that I have a particular effect on the mesh. Now what I can do is if we go into paint weights here, you can see that I can paint on a non-linear. Right, there's a non-linear paint weight. I'm going to open it up with the tool settings, and this is not unlike a, well, I should probably select the object first. And this is not unlike a regular tool, a regular brush painting tool. In this case, though, instead of sculpting, we will be painting the strength of the effect of this deformer. So if we make this a little bit smaller, right, you can see that I can start painting different. Well, this is a very small difference, so maybe I should just replace with 0.5. You will see the difference. So this, I'm replacing the effects, sorry, the scales of how much this deformer affects this particular set here, and you will notice quickly that the deformation also responds to my current weights. Okay, how much weight do I have in this deformer? I can obviously just you know, either smooth it out. You can smooth out obviously with shift to make it a little bit more appropriate. You can even flood the whole thing with 0.5, and you know, you get, that's what you get. You can even have it at 0 and work in reverse, right? You can start to maybe grab a value of 0. I don't know, 0.4. There you go. Yeah, that was decisive. So as you can see, we basically are painting with 0.4, and there's definitely other ways to do this. You can not only replace, but you can add, you can scale based on the factor here. The only problem I have with this is that for some reason, even though it's normalized, the scaling does not work, at least for me, right? If I add the magnitude, I currently have a magnitude of 0, even though I don't have a magnitude of 0, and I can't make it bigger or smaller. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I think the value needs to be more than 1 for this thing to work. If I go to 50 and then I start building, I can, no, 1 is the max in any case. So yeah, your magnitude will not work. At least I can't get it to work. Anyway, that's how the paint weights work in Maya. So essentially this allows you to, it gives you full control really of how the deformers are going to work on your mesh. Okay. I'm going to close this out. I've got the tweak bits here, which is the envelope. Maybe we want to reduce it. Though I think I'm in the wrong envelope. This is the wrong envelope. And there you can reduce it and you can still get your original shape back, okay? Don't forget at the end of whatever you're doing, either if you want to lock it in, try to delete the history with Alt, Shift, and D to lock your changes in. Right. Well, that took quite a while. A lot longer than I expected, but play around with these. Maybe find a particular use for it. Just be aware that these things exist. In the next video, we're going to go over everything we just in these last videos went through. A couple of things like how to maybe extrude a face over a curve, right? And maybe just go over some of these. Just go over some stuff like the tweak mode, whatever that is, right? Some general tips on how to perform modeling, how to basically approach modeling, and we're going to start modeling finally after that video. All right, guys, that is all. We went through all of these, and I will see you in the next video, which will be probably the final video of this whole Maya modeling preparation type deal. All right, I know this was like a crash course, so that's as best as I can. That's the best I can do, at least for now. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.